President Joe Biden has just hours ago completed his valedictory speech, if you will, his final speech, at least on the world stage as U.S. president, because he'll be retiring or resigning from office or completing his term actually on January 20th of last year. This is likely the last time, at least on the world stage, that he addresses people. He was wanting to set the groundwork and the stage for his legacy, for what he wanted to bestow on the world and how he wants to be remembered. And goodness gracious, if that is if that was his objective, he's not going to like the results of it. Because what this was is something that was just so disconnected from actual reality on the ground that it's embarrassing and it's shameful. And I'm going to show you some of what we're talking about here, but most of what we saw, and I guess this is nothing unique to this particular speech, and a lot of the heads of state are going to do the same thing. A lot of bumper stickers, but in the situation that we're in right now, where there is lots of wars and potential for wars that could be catastrophic for mankind, for our own country, this is not a time for bumper stickers. This is a time for actual leadership, and to where you actually do what he has claimed to do on so many occasions, shape events. We've shown you that clip several times from last April, I think, where he bragged and just was hitting the lectern there, talking about how we aren't just going along with the flow of the world. We shape events. We make things happen because we're the indispensable nation and the most powerful nation in the history of the world, all that kind of stuff. If that were true, then what I would expect to see today, what I think we should see today, was the president of the United States telling people how we're going to shape events in a positive way, something that has some relation to what's actually going on the ground and that has a plausible chance for success. Listen, I say this a lot and it bears repeating. Nobody's saying that you can only do things that are easily attainable. I mean, if that was the case, then mankind would be, hundreds of years behind technologically where we are, and many things that, as I think has been said in recent days, that seemed impossible were impossible until they were done. Nelson Mandela is one of the examples that's cited here recently, and rightfully so. The Mandela case that keeps being cited is an instructive one, because that man had a force of will that he was willing to push against the currents of his time and against all of the prevailing powers that were even in his own country, and said, no, I have a superior vision, a vision that brings equality back to the front here, and we're not going to allow this horrible situation to exist, and here's my vision for a new reality. Now, that's the kind of leadership that we can get behind. Not one that does what we saw today, which is throw a bunch of bumper stickers, totally divorced from reality, no leadership of any sort, and literally just like being on a leaf being rolled down the river, providing no navigation whatsoever, just wherever events are carrying the flow of things. That's where this speech went. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's first of all start off with what he said about the ceasefire and a hostage deal that he says he's put together.
I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war.
Literally, it's just bumper stickers. It's just little phrases just strung together. In the war, in Palestinian suffering, have a ceasefire, a negotiated deal. There's no reality to that, because for that to be the case, Israel has to want a ceasefire. Israel has to be willing to make compromises to get a ceasefire. The other side is willing to make compromises. Hamas has been devastated by this war, by the 11 months of the conflict. The the Gaza Strip, or the Palestinians, have been devastated from this, and they definitely want a ceasefire. They want an end to the conflict. They do want those things, and they're willing to make compromises to get them. But Israel is not. Israel doesn't want a negotiation. We've shown you that so many times in so many graphic ways. And nothing more clearly when you have American officials continually, from the president of the United States on down, begging the Israeli side to do anything to get a negotiated ceasefire. He made that claim right there that he has a deal. It's been endorsed by all these people. And a lot of that is true. It has been endorsed by a number of these countries. And So what? It hasn't been endorsed by Israel. It hasn't been accepted by Israel because the Biden administration is unwilling to use this power that he boasts about having to shape events, and instead is allowing the shots to be called by the Israeli side. And listen, it's self-evident on the ground. No matter what the Israeli spokespeople say with their mouths on a regular basis, they don't want a ceasefire in Hamas. They want to, as Naftali Bennett, I think earlier today, repeated, they want to destroy Hamas, and now they want to destroy Hezbollah. Their words, not mine. I'm not just saying this is kind of how I interpret their events. This is what they're saying verbatim from Netanyahu on down. They want to destroy Hamas, and they want to destroy Hezbollah. And you cannot destroy either one of those because they are mainly an idea and a resistance. And it's worth noting that Hezbollah itself came from the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. They didn't exist before the 1982 18-year occupation. And then Israel fought the Second Lebanese War in 2006. And then they have already opened the phases of this third one. There is no negotiation. Benjamin Netanyahu said earlier today as well that they have no intention of stopping anything until, quote, the threat has been reduced and eliminated. And the only thing that they're looking for here, any negotiation per se, is in terms of surrender. They want the Hezbollah side to completely lay down their arms and do nothing and basically walk away from the border. And no people are going to do that when they're being destroyed, absolutely crushed from the air, and bombs and other kinds of attacks and assassinations that the Israeli side has been doing. You see that Naftali Bennett and Netanyahu and several others say, we've been attacked by Hezbollah. And the words that they use are unprovoked. We have done nothing, which is self-evidently untrue on the surface of it. If you just watch CNN or Fox News or anything else, you see that Israel's doing a hell of a lot to the people of Lebanon. And now that there's been more deaths in the last 24 hours than at any time since the 2006 Lebanon War, and in this current environment right here, the most since the Civil War in Lebanon, that was like a 15-year civil war. This has been the highest concentration of people being killed since that time. That's how big what's going on so far is. And yet you still see Biden actually talking there with his bumper stickers like he actually has some influence on something. He has none. Well, that's one thing. Then the next thing, and honestly, following that one, this one's even more embarrassing because one more time for an American audience, and let's be clear, this was not for an international audience. This was not, even though it's at the United Nations, it's definitely not for Israel because they're laughing at this. People in America may not know. That's why we're going to play it. Roll.
As we look ahead, we must also address the rise of violence against innocent Palestinians on the West Bank and set the conditions for a better future, including a two-state solution where Israel enjoys security and peace and full recognition and normalized relations with all its neighbors, where Palestinians live in security, dignity, and self-determination in a state of their own.
Tepid response. Okay, that bumper sticker there, Israel living secure within its borders, Palestinians safe and secure, a two-state solution. I agree with all that. That's exactly what I want. I'm not hesitating in saying that I want Israel to have safety and security and to live within their borders without the fear of terrorism or of rockets being fired on them. I desire that. But I concurrently desire for the the Palestinian side to have the ability to live without rockets falling on their heads, without having to worry about their people being killed, whether it's in the Palestinian areas of the West Bank or in the Gaza Strip. And all of those, and the only way you get there is some kind of a two-state solution. And that means both sides will have to make some sort of compromises to have an ability to live together. It has bedeviled everybody since 1948, actually since before that. And it is probably on the planet Earth, no more difficult situation exists than this one. And it belies any kind of easy solution. There are none. But there are possibilities. You talk about having the force of will of leadership. This is where leadership is needed. Somebody has, with the power and authority that Biden claims that we have, has to be able to use that leverage and to use that power and authority to compel both sides to come to some kind of an accommodation for the benefit of everybody in the region and, frankly, in the world. Well, I'll keep it at the region. It is at the region, definitely for those two countries, but even the region. That's something that's absolutely necessary, something that we can do if we're willing to use our power and our leverage. And instead, all we do is use bumper sticker words with no power behind them and then no intent. I can't imagine that in his mind and in his heart that President Biden actually thinks that we're going to get a two-state solution when Netanyahu has publicly rejected the idea and continues to do so, as he has for decades, by the way. He's never said anything except he doesn't want a two-state solution. He doesn't want any kind of Palestinian state. He actually wants the Palestinians to just go away. He wants that problem solved. Ergo, he wants to destroy Hamas, which is nearly anyone who's in the Gaza Strip at the moment. That's why they're continuing to just pummel place after place. And now they're going back again into the northern area of the Gaza City in that strip. Seems like they're just going to try and repeat. They're just going to roll back and start again. And that's going to continue on until somebody does something to stop them. And the idea of a two-state solution is a fantasy, and it's an insult to the people of Palestine to hear those kinds of words, which are supposed to give hope, but because they're divorced from any kind of reality or willingness on the part of the United States to take any action, it just crushes their hope and makes them feel even more helpless. And when people are desperate and they have no hope, they very often take desperate measures and desperate actions. And that is not good for Israel or anybody else in the region. And it's not good for the United States. And it's definitely not good for the Palestinian people. But that is where we are right here. And apparently, whether it's going to be Kamala Harris next time or Trump, there doesn't seem that there's going to be any difference between their policies. So I don't see any possibility that the United States is going to do the right thing, no matter who it is that's going to be taking that off. We just have to hope for a future beyond this administration, beyond this election, where somebody could finally rise up with a little bit of courage and foresight. And since they bring it up, yeah, let's see if we can get some of these South African ideas from Nelson Mandela. We need that kind of leadership in here. But we don't have it for that, and we don't have it for other things either. So now let's move on to the next part of this speech, where he was talking about the Russia-Ukraine war. And he, again, says something that's, at least he has the fiction of talking about to settle the issue of the Palestinian/Hamas and Israel situation. He talks about wanting to bring peace. There's no such claim on the Russia-Ukraine war. He wants more war. Watch this.
But most importantly, the Ukrainian people stood up. I asked the people of this chamber to stand up for them. The good news is Putin's war has failed, and at his core aim. He set out to destroy Ukraine, but Ukraine is still free. He set out to weaken NATO, but NATO is bigger, stronger, more united than ever before, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. But we cannot let up. The world now has another choice to make. Will we sustain our support to help Ukraine win this war and preserve its freedom, or walk away and let aggression be renewed and a nation be destroyed? I know my answer. We cannot grow weary. We cannot look away. And we will not let up on our support for Ukraine, not until Ukraine wins a just and durable peace in the UN Charter.
Okay, this one is worse than just bumper stickers. It is completely divorced from reality. And the reason why it's so important and egregious is because policies and actions follow these ideas and beliefs that are disconnected from reality. Ergo, when you try to, it's something along the lines of saying, hey, I got a broken leg here. Do you mind putting it in a cast and then giving you, medical help if you had cancer? Like, here, let's give you chemotherapy. What? I got a broken leg. I don't have cancer, so I need a cast. No, let's go ahead and give you this one here because that's what we want. That's what we have. So we're going to go ahead and give you chemotherapy. That sounds absurd and irrational. That's what we're doing. This is the equivalent of what we're doing. That is how divorced from reality what it is. I mean, his first comment there, Putin, the good news is Putin has failed. Has he? Has he failed? What planet are you on? Do you not look at the tactical updates from each day? In the last 24 hours, there have been considerable additional movements on the Eastern Front, in the Pokrovsk area, in the Zaporizhia area, in the Kupiansk area. Even up in the north, there's been some additional areas where the Ukraine incursion into Kursk is getting squeezed down at the neck of that, and it's causing even more casualties to the Ukraine side and putting their position in even more tenuous a position where they either going to have to withdraw pretty quick or they're going to lose those troops. They're going to have to do one or the other. How do you call that Putin having lost, having been defeated? He had failed, to use his words out there. Everything that Russia has been doing to increase their personnel, they've now expanded for the second time in this war the total of their armed military force on active duty up to 1.5 million. That is 50% bigger than it was on the time of their invasion. The number of troops they have in Ukraine is at least 4 times larger than it was in 2022. Their troops are better trained now. Their military capacity is expanded, where they have discovered new weapons of war, new ways to fight. And now then their troops have experience on the ground in the most modern types of war that ours don't. And so you see a bigger military, you see a military industrial complex that is basically on a full-time wartime footing. I think I've seen upwards of 12% of GDP that Russia is now putting behind its war effort. Their economy is growing and getting stronger, while Western Europe is getting weaker. You call that a Russian failure? And so everywhere you look, Russia is moving more and more along the pathway to a military victory. And you're acting this fiction as though he's failed. And then you say the other stuff like, oh, well, NATO is bigger and stronger and more unified. They're bigger. They did add 2 new people. So it's true on that. Sweden and Finland have been added. But then you have Turkey, Slovakia, and Hungary are very much not united behind what they are. And they are pushing for a resolution to this, a negotiated settlement. Hungary, in fact, said, we're not sending anything to Ukraine. It's no military support at all. So we're out on whatever NATO's doing. Others are starting to waffle. You see the Chancellor of Germany has said, none of our long-range weapons here. It's time to accelerate looking for a negotiated settlement. That's what he said recently. Does that sound unified to you? Does that sound stronger than ever to you when you've got now starting to crumble within the alliance itself with wanting to go on because they see the reality? They do see the reality that Russia is winning the war. There's no other way to put it that's accurate. That's what's happening on the ground. But you see it's completely divorced from any thinking that the president has here. And then the last thing that's so egregious about that last section there is that he says he's talking about aspirational things and what sounds good, going back to his bumper sticker stuff. Are we going to surrender and give up on Ukraine? Or are we going to stand firm and continue to go? Well, as for me, okay, well, that's great. If there's a possibility for it, if the balance was something like this, and maybe the Russia was even a little bit on the upside, and if you just provided 2 or 3 categories or a bunch of certain kinds of thing that it could bring it back into some kind of equilibrium and give the Ukraine side a legitimate shot at winning, even if it was still on the downside, but if it was a legitimate shot that if they just, had a few lucky breaks on the battlefield, maybe they could win. There would be some room to say, maybe that's something we should do. Russia did invade Ukraine. Doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with them. They did. They did on February 2022. They went in large numbers and 5 axes and all that kind of stuff. So if you're Ukraine, you should want to win. Any country would, no question about it. But if there is no fundamentals that shows they even have a chance, and especially after now more than 2.5 years of war, and you see the casualties are off the charts, especially for the Ukraine side, which has much smaller manpower from which to pull, then you're actually harming the Ukraine side. You're actually enabling, by giving all this ammunition and all this support and diplomatic support and public support, all you're doing is enabling more Ukrainians to die, but you won't change the outcome. You may delay it off. Remember, this war could have been over. It could have been avoided, so it didn't have to happen at all. then it could have been off the table less than 2 months into the war. It could have been over. The death and destruction would have stopped. But no, we weren't able to listen to reality. We got rid of that. We've thrown off the table any other chances of a negotiated settlement, and we keep going on to this utterly fiction that's unsupportable by any facts. And now then you see Ukraine's just dying in larger numbers. I mean, it's just crazy to continue to be blind to that. So if Biden's looking for some way to set a legacy, I don't think this is the way to do it. Then the next, we're a couple of other things I want to talk about here. More on the aspirational thing. Those are some specific policy things, but one of the things you said, aspirational, I kind of agree with, of course. The operational part of it is a problem, but here's what he said.
Even as we navigate so much change, one thing must not change. We must never forget who we're here to represent. We, the people. These are the first words of our Constitution, the very idea of America. They inspired the opening words of the UN Charter. Never forget, we are here to serve the people, not the other way around. Because the future will be won by those who unleash the full potential of their people, to breathe free, to think freely, to innovate, to educate, to live and love openly without fear. That's the soul of democracy. It does not belong to any one country.
I certainly agree with that. Freedom, humanity doesn't belong, those virtues don't belong to any country. Those are literal universal human aspirations and beliefs. Everybody wants to be free. Everybody wants to have the right to educate yourself and to live and breathe free, as he said, and to go as far as your mind, your intellect, and your capacity can take you. Terrific. Those are great aspirations, which I fully endorse. And agree also, they don't belong to any one country, meaning us. But you see, we want to put a big asterisk on that by saying, well, we want people like us to be free, or people that we like to be free. And if we don't like you, we don't want you to be free. We don't want you to have the freedom of choice. We don't want you to be able to elect the leaders that you choose. We want to choose those for you. And you see, here's the thing. The world sees this. That we may be fooling a lot of people here in our country, a lot of Americans who watch us. And of course, we're in a campaign season and he wants his side to win. Biden does. So his primary target here is not the world. His primary target here is the American electorate. So he wants to cast a vision for what he thinks is going to make people vote for his side, for his vice president. But the people of the world aren't fooled by this. And even some here in the United States aren't fooled by it either, because they see the gross double standard in this, and just the rhetoric that is belied by the actual actions that we take. And that is the worst part. And one of the things that I just find very egregious is that we keep talking of this great game and things that, I mean, for all of his flaws, Ronald Reagan had a lot of flaws as president. He truly did. But he also did a lot of really good things, and he meant a lot of what he said. And you see, when he had that famous, tear down this wall, Gorbachev, when he was in Berlin at the time. But then you see he was willing to talk to it. He was willing to reach out to the other side. And they actually did bring the wall down. And they had a decent relationship, him and Gorbachev. And you see that they were willing to get into arms reduction treaties, mutually binding treaties for the United States and for the Soviet Union. And we ratcheted down the pressure. And everybody agreed, benefited because of it. And a lot of the things you said, he wanted to be in his final speech from the Oval Office. He wanted to be a city on the hill. He wanted America to show by the light of its actions what he wanted to do. And again, we can quibble because he didn't fulfill that properly, and he had some dark areas, but there were a lot of areas where he meant that. And at least aspirationally and with his intent, he tried to bring that into being. He genuinely wanted to help people, not just in our country, but around the world, and did a lot of positive things. Again, we get back to this whole issue of leadership. If you can stand there on the world stage and mean those things and then put actions behind it, and that means hold us accountable for our actions, for our standard, hold our allies accountable and up for our standards. And if you want to be an ally of ours, and if you want our our money and our support, then there's a certain standards you have to meet, and you have to meet them too. And just because you're our ally doesn't mean you can wantonly violate all these things. And then use our influence and our leadership ability on states that aren't our allies, and that we, because of our good actions and our holding ourselves to the same standard that we hold everybody else to, we have moral authority. We can do that. We can rein in even some of the most difficult actors in the world. At least there's some possibility for that. But when the other exists, and when we don't even come close to even desiring to meet our own standards, and when we have double standards for other people, these people are good, those people are bad, we get to decide. And so we can do egregious things against these groups we don't like, and we're fine with it. The people around the world aren't fine with it. So we lose moral authority. We lose the ability to influence malign actors even, and we lose to even influence our friends and allies. So everybody does whatever they want to do, and then somehow we're so weak, we still keep providing ammunition, support, and political backing to people who aren't even trying to follow our example or even our rhetoric. Forget about the example. I guess the example that we set is pretty bad. But one last thing I want to talk about here, because it's one of the worst ones. All those, that was pretty bad. But there's one more thing he said which deserves special note, and that's about war and peace.
It's time to move forward. The Security Council, like the UN itself, needs to go back to the job of making peace, of brokering deals to end wars and suffering. And to stop the spread of the most dangerous weapons, of stabilizing troubled regions in East Africa, from East Africa to Haiti.
You want to stabilize areas, and you're talking about the proliferation of weapons. So while he was on the stage, while he was talking about that just hours ago, this news was published by Task and Purpose that we are sending 101st Airborne Division troops are going to the Middle East in the middle of all that's going on right there. And 3rd Infantry Division will go to Europe. I think the 101st is actually a rotation, so there's not any additional troops there, though we have added additional troops to the Middle East. Just a couple of days ago, it was announced by General Ryder. But you see this this insert there from the article. It says the Army has also said that the 3rd Infantry Division's 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team Raider will join an ongoing mission to, quote, deter further aggression against NATO countries. But there's no threat to NATO countries. Russia's not threatening NATO countries. Russia's in a war with Ukraine. So then one asks, why are you sending more troops there? Because what's the message you're sending? Again, I'll tell you, especially for Ukraine, you're telling them, keep fighting, keep on slugging away at Russia. We had, I came across a quote from a year ago from Lindsey Graham a couple of days ago. It was just horrible, where he actually publicly said, yeah, you know what? Let's just keep supporting Ukraine and give them everything they need, because until there's nobody left to fight, they'll keep on struggling. So he openly says, I don't care about the Ukraine people. I just care that they're doing something to harm Russia because I don't like Russia. So if all of the men of Ukraine die in a war, even if Russia's still standing at the end, I'm still cool with it because some of the Russians have died in the meantime. So that's a win-win for us. And that is immoral. It's reprehensible. And he's just the most outspoken. He's hardly the only one. Lots of people do that too. And so again, President Biden's rhetoric is right. We should be seeking peace. We should be seeking to curtail things. But I mean, our country, and this is even predates Biden, I mean, we're getting out of all of these nuclear proliferation treaties that we'd been in with Russia. We gotten out of the ABM treaty. And a couple of others as well. No one's even talking about any further limitations. In fact, we're publishing information about how we're expanding our nuclear doctrine to be able to fight and win 3 nuclear wars at the same time, which predictably is causing Russia to expand their nuclear arsenal. China is expanding theirs. There's not even an effort to curtail any of it. And you can say, well, no, actually ours is in response to China's rise. And you're going, okay, China had like 300 nuclear weapons, and now then that's up to, I don't know, I think they're trying to double that or something. We've got like 4,000 or 5,000 of them. So even after they finish this expansion, it's not going to be a fraction what we have. So it's irrelevant, right? So what we should be doing is saying, Okay, I've already got dominance in this area that you can never even match, much less beat. And you don't need to, because just a handful of nuclear weapons in anybody's hands is enough to just devastate and crush any country. So what we should be doing, instead of building our, bigger and stronger, even more than what we already have, we should be working with all of these countries to try and tamp this down. We should be using diplomacy here, but nobody wants to use diplomacy in the United States anymore. We only want to build power because we perversely think that if we keep going down that path, then we're going to somehow magically get this peace that we want. And I'm telling you for a fact, anyone who believes that America will be stronger and peaceful, that Israel will be stronger and peaceful, or that Ukraine will ever be peaceful and strong by trying to use more weapons, more arms, more war, you are self-defeating. You are cutting your own throat. None of us are going to have peace, because the more you press like that, as we're seeing throughout the world, both in the Middle East, in Europe, and the Indo-Pacific, the more you push, the more you focus on kinetic means and raise power, the more fear you're going to generate in others. And it's not deterrence, because the people around the world, just human beings themselves, almost never respond that way. They do the opposite. When they're afraid, they get stronger, and they want to build their own capabilities to match what you have and to overmatch if they're attacked, etc. And so we just have this arms race going back and forth, and this mentality that is spreading around the world. And I believe we are probably late in the game, like the 11th hour or 59 minutes, a potential big time global war that will make the World War II pale in comparison in terms of the casualties and the consequence to it. It's not necessary. Everything, until it happens, everything is avoidable. But it will take actual leadership to get this thing off the deck, to pull it back from the brink here. And it won't matter whose fault it was. It won't matter who started anything. Once a war breaks out, a big one, and there's so many places around the world where this could spark and happen and occur from, everyone will lose. America will lose. Israel will lose. Ukraine will lose. Russia will lose. China will lose. Iran will lose. North Korea will lose. If this thing expands out like that, there will be no winners, and all of us will be losers. And the irony is that some of the aspirations that Biden said here in his United Nations speech are good and right. We can live in a world, certainly if not total peace, because humans are flawed, and there's always going to be evil actors out there at various places that are going to want to gum the works up. You can't get away from that, because that's human nature, but you can at least bring stability and relative peace and calm and give people a chance to live, because there are so many really good people in this world. And everywhere I've ever been in the world that I've visited, and I've visited most parts of it, there's always wonderful people that I've met, great human beings. And I've been so impressed everywhere. I've never been anywhere where I didn't find somebody that I liked, that I found something to be praiseworthy. Every country has that. The vast majority of people all over the planet want to live in peace. They just want to live their lives. They want to be able to have a family. They want to be able to have fun with their friends sometimes. They want to feel like they're accomplishing something, and working hard and all that. Most people have that desires. And we should bank on that. And if we had some leadership that was working towards that, that would be much more likely than stumbling into a war that could just devastate and undo everything that we've worked so hard since World War II to build. But that's just where we are right now. So I felt it was important to show this here, because I don't want people to be taken away by the bumper stickers and thinking things are better than they are, because we're in a very, very perilous time here, and we desperately need to walk back from the brink. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. I want to remind you that this afternoon we have Larry Johnson, because one of those issues we talked about there, we're going to go into a little bit more depth with more information than I talked about here. But this firestorm that's going on in Lebanon, the whole region is potentially on the verge of exploding here, and it's going to take some action to walk us back from that. Larry Johnson is going to really help us unpack a lot of what's going on in that area. Be sure and tune in 3 o'clock this afternoon Eastern time, and we will see you then on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.